Good morning, cruel world. I zhuzhed myself up a bit today because it's day 11 and I'm only doing this for 3 more days. And then I'm over it. Got a coat of mascara on, if you can even tell, and a lipstick. And I sort of did something with my hair, but I don't know. My hair's very complicated at the moment, but do you know what? We don't care anymore because no one's going to see it. And plus, I'm not going to a hairdresser for 30 minutes. Why would I do that? Don't do that. Don't risk it, people. On today's agenda of the day, I'm going to do an art tutorial because there's not really much else. The 2 main things I want to do today is art stuff and exercise, which I didn't do yesterday. And I'm not going to pressure myself to exercise. If I don't get to it, I don't get to it. But I want to do another workout from that center thing that I talked about 2 days ago. So that's on the agenda. And I also need to spritz my mushrooms. Never thought I would say that in a sentence. So let's just, I'm still figuring out how to use this tripod. God, pathetic. Looks like they're growing. I'm not sure. But anyway, we're just going to, yeah, lift it a bit and just spritz in there. Spritz in the hole. Leave that up there to grow. So excited that in a few more days I can leave this room. No one's gonna yell at me for leaving the room. I'm gonna go for a walk in the park, if that's still allowed. I'm going to cook really cool food. I can't wait to do that. I just want to cook. And I also want to sit in the car and drive and just look at the empty streets. I feel like that would be very interesting to see, like how suburbia and the cityscape changes because no one's allowed out. My isolation is almost over, but the world's isolation, I feel like it's just beginning. Okay, I'm sorry. Do I live in a restaurant? Like, what? Yum. It needs more syrup though, so we're doing this real Canadian maple syrup. It's even in French, so let's do that. Oh, yummy. Okay, so I put out a thing on Instagram and I said, tell me what you want me to paint. And some of the things people wanted me to paint was, is that going to focus? Am I going to have to be that guy and put my hand behind it? Breastfeeding mother, bok choy, smoky, pavlova. Latest thing is someone's asked me to paint some native flowers. That's my favorite. It's the easiest thing to paint. I think that's why I like to do it. I thought for fun I could do a tutorial on how I paint flowers. So I'm going to do that. So first thing you need is paper. I prefer fancy watercolor paper, 300 GSM rough paper, not gridded, but you can also use A4 print paper. It won't be the same quality, but I mean, paper is paper at the end of the day and we're in quarantine, so do the best you can, sweetie. My go-to brush is this brush. I love it because it absorbs a lot of water, especially towards the top, so the color will run for longer, even though it will dilute after a while because more water gets into it. And I was just showing other brushes just to say, like, it's better to have a fat round brush. And then for colors, I use this Winsor & Newton palette. I've had it for ages, that's why it's so messy and dirty. This palette's really awesome because you can change the colors, like they're cubes and they come out and you can replace them pretty easily. Okay, so to begin, I'm painting some Banksias or thereabouts. I just copy the general shape of the flower, so I was looking at flowers online and just copying them. So I've got the big red Banksias and then like the more dull, smaller ones, which I'll outline later. I'm dotting in some wattle, some yellow wattle there, and then yeah, more smaller Banksias, which you'll see how they turn out once I add some lines. Then I'm adding some other just like more diluted dots. It's kind of to add more depth because you don't want too much white space, but then you also do want a bit of white space. It kind of complements the whole thing if there's a good amount of white and filled out space, if that makes sense. So then I've done some purple flowers. I don't know what they're called, but anyway. And then the red and black flowers are the Sturt Desert Peas. I'm just adding the black dots there. What else did I do? Oh yeah, so then I went in and added more detail to the Banksias. So they're kind of like, I like to think of them as corn cobs. So I've sort of done like crisscross on them. I've added another dimension to these purple flowers. as you can see. So I do it very messy and very quick. The quicker you do it, the better, because then the paint dries quicker. But if you take your time, it can look way more professional, but I prefer a more messy look. Then I've added some gum leaf? Eucalyptus leaf? I've added leaves. I added a bunch of leaves. I was looking at images online on different native Australian plants. So there's an assortment of leaves, an assortment of flowers. I'm by no means a native plant connoisseur. I was just looking at images on the internet and doing my best to interpret them. So here we go. This is me now adding more detail into the Banksias, dotting in some more red, but notice that I've still kept it quite, like there's still quite a lot of white, because you want those act like highlights. Then I'm adding more detail to the smaller Banksia, and I'm adding branches to the wattle, which I'll go over with a pen anyway, but again, like adding that brown adds more depth and makes it look like a tiny bit more realistic, even though at the end of the day this is just blobs on paper. So I'm doing that, adding more detail, and I also add more depth to the leaves. So I'm adding a bit more green, or just adding more leaves in general. Yeah, I'm adding more leaves in general and adding more depth to the leaves, so they're not just one-dimensional. Then with an even darker brown, I go in and I just shade half the Banksia. That again gives it more depth, and we've kept the white so it looks more rounded. I do the same with the mini Banksias, and then I'm sure I added more detail into something. Yes, more of the leaves, just adding even more depth and more to the mini Banksias, because I forgot where I painted them all. As you can see, after a while it just starts to look like a blob, so you have to remember where you did everything. And then I've just added some blue wildflowers, just kind of dotted them around really messily. As you can see, there's not a lot of definition. We'll add that later. Now is definition time. This is probably my favorite part. Once it's all dried, grab a very fine detail pen. I tend to use micron pens, and basically you just add as much or as little detail as you want to your flowers. And also, the messier the better. Lines don't have to all meet, and you can thicken some lines and do some lines kind of thin, and then after a while it will look like this.